if she gets to know I'm doing this instead of writing, I'm just like, I'm just, I mean, I'll be like almost visualize. It basically gives me the obsidian-like functionality of these network diagrams. I've called upon these font declarations whenever it's necessary. And as I go further and further into this novel, it's
Okay.
super smooth.
Yep.
I use it for my Zettelkasten because it's incredibly smooth and doesn't have the janky scrolling that
Yep.
most terminals have, right? For the fact that it needs to be set for an A5 paper or A5 book. This is talking about these values are, and I was curious, and essentially that's why I went from NeoVim to even. I'm not trying to like take you away from Markdown, right?
I'm thinking
Like
about it.
fight for Markdown, man. Fight for Markdown. It's a great format in itself.
Everyone, I have a special guest today. Dina, how's it going?
It's going well, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for your time. We didn't plan this with a lot of time, so really appreciate you joining.
No, not a problem. I've enjoyed the previous episodes with the maintainers of NeoVim, I believe. So that was great, and I'm glad to be, sharing anything of use to your audience.
Yeah, I watched one of your videos in the NeoVim Conf, I think it was
Sure.
2024. It was
Mhm.
this video right here. So I really liked it, and I was intrigued
Mm.
because you do a
Mhm.
lot of writing. I do
Yeah.
write as well, but not professionally. I just write Markdown.
Mm.
So I want to know more about the different formats there are: LaTeX, however it's
Mm.
pronounced,
Sure.
org,
Sure. Yeah.
Markdown. What
Mm.
someone that does this professionally thinks about each one of
Mhm.
them, and whatever you want to
Yeah.
share with us, right? So, you mind sharing a little bit more
Sure.
about you?
Yeah, sure. Let me just start off with that. Hi everyone. I'm Dina. I'm a multidisciplinary artist based in Colombo, Sri Lanka. By multidisciplinary, I mean my work kind of spans between the literary and the cinematic, and hopefully in the future, everything in between as well. As far as my novel work is concerned, I wrote a novel called First Utterance back in 2016, which ended up winning the National Literary Award in Sri Lanka. In around 2 years ago, I released my first film. I'm currently working on my follow-up books, a couple of screenplays for film, as well as a TV series as well. Yeah, I think that covers everything. Oh, so could I possibly add to this idea? I mean, this talk about open source software and text editing and so on and so forth. Around the time of the pandemic, I sort of stumbled upon Vim and I realized this was exactly what I was looking for as far as being able to write, edit, and world build at the speed of thought, which previous to that, I was basically like any writer. I was based on all my work was inside rich text formats like docx and so on and so forth. And I was using the traditional word processing software like Microsoft Word and Google Docs and so on and so forth. The discovery of Vim and thereafter Git and plain text forced me to kind of rethink my toolkit and my tool chain in itself. So the first part of it was shifting from rich text to plain text, and in that process, I sort of discovered the various different markup syntaxes that are there. Markdown being the obvious choice, but from Markdown, I kind of moved on. I tried out Markdown, I tried out org mode, and then I finally settled on LaTeX. So all three of those plain text standards or syntaxes markup languages run. All three of those plain text markup languages had their users. Currently, I use mostly org mode and LaTeX. Org mode is what I use for almost all my non-fiction manuscript writing. So that could mean anything between my personal research notebooks, my proposals to clients, my like putting together to-do lists, so on and so forth. So org mode is very powerful for that. I use LaTeX for the writing of my screenplays, which I will show during the course of this conversation. Does that answer all your questions? All your what you had in mind, Christian?
Yeah, actually it does. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your novel? What's it about, your book?
Okay. So the first novel that came out, First Utterance, this was written very much during the time I was writing on Microsoft Word, and it's called First Utterance. I wrote it way back in 2012, and finally had the self-belief to publish it around 2016. And after that, I found it had a fairly positive response locally and internationally. Locally in Sri Lanka, it ended up winning the National Literary Award. What the book is about is it is the first of a series of novels called the Miragian Cycles. And the Miragian Cycles essentially imagines a world that goes through the karmic cycle of death and rebirth, Now, usually we think of the karmic cycle as a singular thing, as something that happens to an individual. If you are familiar with, Eastern and specifically Indian philosophy and mythology, it's usually cyclical for a single individual. But in my book series, I sort of imagined this entire country that goes through this cycle of death and rebirth. And they go through this thing, endless cycle of death and rebirth for eternity. And the first book essentially tracks one of those cycles from the beginning to the end. Right now, I'm working on book 2, which kind of takes our readers into a point when the country is about to face its inevitable apocalypse or the end of another cycle. That's taking a little longer. It's basically the second book is science fiction, and more science fiction and less magic realism, whereas book 1 was more magic realism. Book 2 is basically a love story narrated by a artificial intelligent being. And yeah, that's pretty much what I'm working on as far as my writing is concerned.
I noticed that your book is available here in Amazon, right?
Yeah, it is available on Amazon as an ebook. Those of you who are interested in getting the printed version, reach out to me and I'll be happy to sort out shipping and send it to wherever.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. And let's see. Okay. Let me see what I have here in the topics. We already covered who you are, where people can find you. Well, this is your website. I'm gonna put it in the video description. There's links here to your book in Amazon.
Yeah.
I'm also going to put your GitHub repo there.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're on Twitter. And this is your YouTube channel, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna put all of these in the video description.
Thank you.
Anything else you want to share about you with us before we move to the technical topics?
No, I think once we touch upon the technical topics, I'm sure the audience is wondering what the hell I'm doing here, because what do I know about FOSS and text editors, right? So I instead of me, premeditating those questions, once you ask it, I think I'll, add some of the biographical stuff about how exactly I came across all this open source technology.
Okay, wonderful. Now, regarding your YouTube channel, I'm curious. I do see that you have some videos here. Are there plans to continue this, or what's the status of the YouTube channel?
I mean, so every time I want to start off, it's only the three talks from the three WIM conferences that are really interesting. That would be the one from a few months ago. That's one from 2 years ago, and there's one from 3 years ago. I would, if anyone's interested, I would start off with the very first WIM conference that I spoke at in 2021. It's called Writing, Editing, and World Building at the Speed of Thought. The one I did after that is called Wikipedia, or how I built my second brain using NeoVim. And the third one is how I came up with my own writing-based NeoVim config. So those are the three videos. And I think over the course of this chat with Christian, I will be touching on parts of all those videos. So as far as the YouTube channel, every time I want to sit down and actually do some serious YouTube production, I end up having to work in actual production work, so I just don't have the time for it. But I do hope to invest some time and in the future.
Okay, wonderful. Okay. And the first question that I have here is, why LaTeX? Well, what is LaTeX basically? I'm just a 5-year-old now that doesn't know what it is. I see the name everywhere. I see a lot of people using it, but I don't get it. There's people in the audience that don't know about it too. Would you mind sharing a bit more about LaTeX?
Sure. Yeah. So the easiest way that I've come to understand LaTeX is to think about it as CSS styling sheets, but for printed documents, specifically for PDFs and so on and so forth. So how is that relevant for me, and how would that potentially be relevant for your audience? For me specifically, what it does is it allows me to write in a consistent. Essentially, I'm writing a novel that is going to be in A5 size, right? Now, if I were to write that on a Microsoft Word document, I can, but then that process of then getting that manuscript ready for publication requires a middle person, and the middle person is usually an art director who will take the manuscript and lay it down on a Adobe InDesign file. This can take anywhere between 2 to 3 months, right? With LaTeX, what I can do is I can cut out the middle person completely and write my manuscript that looks about 85 to 95% ready and conforms to the standards of the publishing industry. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm going to just show you a LaTeX document right now. This is my latest manuscript, right? If I do this, you see the PDF?
Yep.
Next to yeah, okay. So this PDF is interesting because when I started working on this manuscript a few years ago, one of the things that I realized was that I had to make it typographic. There had to be a typographic architecture. By that I mean it would require different fonts to talk when it's talking or when it's touching upon different parts of the story. Let me show you an example of what I mean. So as you can already see, there's about 3 different typographic, 3 different fonts essentially. One is for the epigraph, one is for this narrator, and one is for the general narrative in itself. Now, if I was to do this on Microsoft Word, as you can imagine, I would have to, copy, paste, just constantly, instead of focusing on the actual writing of the substance of the manuscript, I would have to be focused on the stylistic aspects of it. Now, the typography forms a backbone of the narrative. It's important for the narrative because that's one of the ways that I and eventually the reader will be able to distinguish the various strands of the narrative, right? So when I was writing it on Microsoft Word, I was conscious that I had to keep to that consistent typographic architecture that I had set. I needed to follow through as I was going deeper and deeper and deeper into the novel. And one of the things that it quickly became apparent was how difficult what that was to do on Microsoft Word. And thankfully, I had discovered LaTeX as a result of my, exploration of NeoVim and plain text and so on and so forth. And I came across LaTeX in the context of scientific papers and mathematical, especially mathematical papers, right? And I found that finally there was a typesetting standard that would allow me to just focus on my substance while focus on the substance of the manuscript and the writing and not so much on the formatting. I could essentially forget about it once I set up the LaTeX document. So how did I set it up, right? As you can see, this is a typical LaTeX document. Here I am basically talking about what the PDF engine is going to be. You can see here where the similarities to CSS style sheets come in, right? Here I'm talking about the fact that it needs to be set for an A5 paper or A5 book. This is talking about these values are essentially margins that are now standard practice in the publishing industry. So you want something that is essentially like allows me to declare all of this stuff up front. Once I declare it, I can then call upon certain packages. These packages is for British English. This is for typography-based stuff. Like, for example, this particular line says use package CS codes. This CS codes is this one, right? It's essentially this one over here, which looks distinct from the rest of the typography, right? Now imagine once again, I was doing this for an entire novel as opposed to like a few pages. It becomes incredibly difficult outside of LaTeX. There is more declarations here. Again, font packages. You can see here I'm saying what the serif font is going to have to be. This is what the monospace font is, and this is the font for poetry and so on and so forth. So you can see once I declare all of that, if I was to just go through this, go through the PDF of my current work in progress manuscript, you can see the different typographical, structures coming into play, and why that was extremely necessary for me to switch to LaTeX in order to achieve this. I can still do this on Microsoft Word. I'm sure someone is asking why can't I do it, but it becomes increasingly difficult, bothersome, annoying, call it what you will, to do this in a way that becomes free flowing, and it doesn't kind of impede the writing itself. Whereas with LaTeX, if I was to show you how
I want to see how you switch between the typographies. Like, how do you call them?
Yeah, you can see the very first one here, right? So if I was to, okay, let's just go to the first page here, and the first page essentially has three different. It has this, which is for this epigraph, right? So when you call on this epigraph package, it allows you to format it in this style, right? So that's done. So all I have to do here is I just have to call on epigraph. Now, when I have to call on the other font, I just have to say select font. Hold on, select font. And I say PCR, when I say select font and PCR, and then I write this bit. I was born last night. You can see, there we go. So the font is automatically changed, right? So all I have to do is just this declaration at the right time, and then turn off the declaration whenever I need it. So when I say font family PCR, it goes into this font. But when I say normal font, it goes into this. So Fireflies, this line Fireflies is in normal font, right? And as you can see, all I've done is I've called on normal font again. So as I'm going through this, you can see how in the middle I've changed certain, like I've called upon these font declarations whenever it's necessary. And as I go further and further into this novel, this became the hardest part of writing in Microsoft Word. And essentially, this is the biggest problem that LaTeX has solved. LaTeX then isn't for your typical note taking unless the note taking is for technical subjects. I'm sure I mean, there's a fairly amazing blog entry from a few years ago of a math student who would take notes in his classroom on Vim using nothing but Vim and LaTeX snippets. And he was able to do this as the lecture is going on. And in the blog post, he basically animated how the whole thing was happening. The impressive part is because he was working in the technical mathematical discipline, he had to call on functions as opposed to me. I'm just calling on random fonts here, right? He had to call on mathematical functions, and mathematical symbols, none of which are on the keyboard. So it was all a matter of just like using these symbols in order to be able to take down those notes really fast. Now, if you were not doing any sort of technical subject and it was just normal note taking, then Markdown and Org mode is very good for that. Personally, for me, if I was just doing plain note taking without any sort of like technical
Requirements.
without any technical requirements. When I say technical requirements, no mathematical formula, right? If that wasn't a function, if that wasn't a necessity, then I would I would just go on Markdown itself. But for me personally, I find Org mode the better solution, and I will take the audience through Org mode when you want to cover it. But right now, we are very much on the LaTeX side. So LaTeX. So if I was to just show you what this entire manuscript was to look like, I'm just going to speed run through this whole thing so you can see, hopefully, the different typographical structures kind of coming into play in the manuscript itself. This would be incredibly difficult to do on a Microsoft Word document, which is why I don't do it. You can also notice how consistent it is. Now, again, if I was to bring up the idea of Microsoft Word, sometimes mine is already is about 206 pages. When I was working on the Microsoft document, it was around the same. It was around the same length. But the problem was it was not consistent. So if I had to put in a new edit somewhere between pages 75 and page 78, and the moment I put that new piece of text, the formatting for the rest of the document just completely goes haywire, right? And once again, I have lost time trying to sort that. The chaos in the formatting as opposed to actually writing. Whereas with LaTeX, I do not have to worry about that. I can go into any section and insert a new paragraph, a new word, or anything of that nature, and it would ensure that the cascading changes are consistent across the document. And you can see that here as well. Like you can see how incredibly consistent the whole thing is, right? So that's pretty much the why LaTeX. And for a person like me, one of the things that it's going to do is when I do send this out as a manuscript to my editor is going to be able to see the manuscript as I intend almost in its final form. My editor will always also see how the typography is supporting the story, or the changes in the typography is supporting the narrative. And they will understand exactly what it is that I'm trying to go for. Again, if I had just sent a PDF of the manuscript as I had on Microsoft Word, that would have been possible. But again, I would have lost time. I would have just gone crazy, I think, because I was going crazy before I discovered Vim for myself. So essentially, that's why LaTeX is great. And the other reason, and this is a reason that's very, very niche for me, because I write in multiple languages, right? So one of the things that I want to be able to write is a trilingual novel. And with a trilingual novel, just for context, Sri Lanka's but its native language is Sinhala and Tamil. English is a link language. So technically, some of us speak all three languages, right? So I'm trying to work on a novel that would kind of capture the sheer strangeness and the surreal aspects of living in a country where all three languages are spoken in every corner sometimes, right? So I wanted to kind of mimic that in novel form. Now again, to do that on Microsoft Word, is it possible? Yeah. Is it an absolute headache to do? Absolutely. Whereas with LaTeX, it's just completely simple. So I'm just going to show you that what that looks like as far as a multilingual document is concerned. Is that okay?
Yeah, yep.
All right. So you asked me that day if I use Tmux. So the answer is yes. I use Tmux when I'm working on LaTeX and NeoWeb.
Okay.
Let me see.
I have experienced that problem with Microsoft Word, and I just do basic stuff. Sometimes I need to use two different footers, right? So you add multiple footers, headers, and you need to add page breaks, and it's a nightmare if you add something in between. And I've done simple things only, and I hate it.
Yeah. I completely understand where you're coming from, man. I would never do it because it's just like, as someone who's spent their entire life on, so the entire life on Microsoft Word, I completely understand your pain. But here, as you can see, it's now shifting between three different languages, right? Again, very easy to do on LaTeX, not so easy to do on it isn't, right? So and again, here too, the declaration is very straightforward. I'm saying it's A5 book. I'm asking you to use this particular package, which is Polyglosia, which allows for multiple languages. So I've asked it to set default language as English. Other languages include Tamil, different fonts, so on and so forth. Where is this? Yeah, as you can see, separate languages all coming into play, and it records it. I mean, it renders it fairly perfectly.
Oh, wonderful!
Yeah. So that's pretty much why LaTeX. That makes. I hope that made sense.
Oh yeah, definitely. I learned a lot. Thanks for explaining it.
No worries. I mean, the thing is this: LaTeX. I'm in no way an expert at all. I came upon LaTeX in the last 2 years, and in the last 2 years, there was, I hate to say this, but there was AI, right? And AI was able to kind of clarify certain things about the LaTeX specifications and documentation that I found confusing at first. So once I was able to, make that or comprehend some of those eccentric bits about LaTeX, everything else became fairly simple.
And can LaTeX completely replace Microsoft Word?
No, I don't think so. LaTeX has a very niche use case. One is for people who are working in very technical mathematical fields, and one is for people like me who needs it for their manuscripts and for their writing work, simply because for us, the typographic architecture of the manuscript is as much of the story as the story in itself. So in that case, I needed it, right? I don't think it'll ever replace Microsoft Word, because Microsoft Word has its purpose, especially in the enterprise. I don't see people anyway leaving that at all. But outside the enterprise, when it comes to people like me working on their, on their creative pursuits, whether it's in the literary side or cinematic side. When I say the cinematic side, there also is a part of it that involves a lot of writing, right? The writing of the screenplays. In all those cases, I would say move your writing towards plain text, away from rich text. And by doing that, what you have is the advantages are multitude. You will have the advantage of version control, portability of data. You will never be locked into a vendor. There's so many advantages that come from just shifting from rich text to plain text. From that, after you make that shift to plain text, which plain text standard you adopt for your purposes will depend on your purposes. I'll be happy to take you through org mode later,
Yeah.
but I hardly ever use Markdown anymore. Like I didn't even when I first started, it was Markdown, right? Like it is for everyone because it's so simple. And but I found, because again, once I first started moving my manuscripts to plain text, especially with this novel that I'm working on right now, I could not in any way or form mimic the typographic architecture that I was talking about. How do I shift different fonts in Markdown? You can't, right? Especially when you're rendering it into a PDF, the Markdown into a PDF, it's just one font that will be used in various weightages, depending on if it's bold styling or italicized or underline or whatnot. But that's about it. It doesn't go beyond that. LaTeX does now, but is there for me the happy middle ground between the very simple Markdown and the very complex LaTeX is org mode. I feel like org mode is everything that I require for a simple markup language. And honestly, org mode is very simple as a markup language. It's incredibly straightforward, really simple. But the advantages of org mode is in the org mode ecosystem, which is just insane.
Okay, we can touch on that.
We'll
in a
touch that,
while.
yeah. Yeah.
And okay, so if you're a writer and you're willing to learn to kind of code and write your novel, you could replace Word with LaTeX, right? Or LaTeX.
Yeah. I mean, theoretically, yes, that's my answer. And
Okay.
I don't see it myself ever moving away from LaTeX for my novels. I don't
Back
see
to
myself
Word.
ever moving away from. No way. I just don't. Like, but I think at some point when I'm sending my work to my editor and they want it in a format where they can make changes, I'll probably have to use Pandoc to convert the LaTeX file to docx and send it to them for any review stuff. And when they send that review back, I'll have to, I think I'll have to look at it inside a word processor, at least the changes, and then make the changes through the LaTeX document itself. A little unnecessarily complicated, but I'd rather do this than have to be stuck inside Microsoft Word.
I have a question. So when you send this to the person that receives this document, whoever that person is, how do you send it? Do you send a LaTeX file? Do you send? You mentioned PDF, right? So
Yeah, it's
how's that
PDF.
process?
I send it as PDF. Most of my editors now have PDF with annotation tools, right? So that's good enough uh, for for most of my editing needs, unless there's something deeply structurally wrong with my first draft, and I hope that that's never the case. Unless that is the case, I don't ever see myself having to, send her the Word version of the manuscript. In which case, I would have to take the LaTeX file, like I said, take the LaTeX file, use Pandoc to convert it into docx and send it to my editor.
And what do they do with the PDF? Like, how do they print it? Do they rewrite it again, or?
No, it's annotation tools, right? I mean, my editors are fairly like when they send me notes, the notes are fairly brief. If a certain section is shit, they will just annotate it with a big red circle and just say this is shit. Rewrite it.
Okay.
That's it. It's that simple, right? It'll never be the case of. I think this is the problem here, unless they have specific issues. In which case, again, when it comes to PDF annotation tools, you can put the virtual yellow stickers or post-it notes and whatnot. Or if it's like overflowing from those tiny things, what they will do is get in touch with me over a call, or it'll be a long ass email.
Okay, so once it's completely done with all the annotations, revisions, and all that, the PDF is what is published as a book.
Yeah, the PDF is the one that will go into the printers, and they, I mean, this version of the PDF will need. I mean, right now I'm using a very compressed version of PDF. The version that I'll send to the printers would be a high res, slightly bigger version of the PDF.
Okay.
It will be bigger in terms of file size.
Okay, wonderful. Okay. Thanks for all that knowledge. And you were mentioning arc mode, so let's talk about the inevitable. Why org, and what's your adventure with org? What's going on there? And what do you use to edit org?
Yeah. I came across org when I was still a Vim user. I think there are plenty of like org plugins for the NeoVim and Vim ecosystems. I think there is something called Vim.org, there is NVim.org, and a couple of others, all of which are great. I've used them. They are great for the purposes that they have. And that's essentially how I discovered org mode. And when I discovered org mode, like I said earlier, it was for me an improved version of Markdown. That's how I saw it. And I'll show you examples of why I think it's an improved version of it. Because of its hierarchical structure, bullet points, it seems innately built to express large ideas, but it just allows you to kind of like compress it into outlines and then expand each outline, over time. And what I felt was org mode was good enough for your tiny notes. It was good enough for your to-do lists, but it's also good enough to write an entire nonfiction book as well. Because you could essentially with the outline, you have created the structure of potentially any nonfiction book, whether that nonfiction book is a textbook, whether it is something to do with like essays or so on and so forth. It's just so good at that. And essentially, that's how I was using it on NeoVim for the longest time. But I kept seeing on YouTube people using org mode on Emacs, and I was curious. And essentially, that's why I went from NeoVim to Emacs. And this is kind of like strange because I spent a good year creating a NeoVim based config for writing and writers called OVWrite, right? So OVWrite was meant to help other writers who may have seen or heard about NeoVim have a higher place to start from, as opposed to me when I started from absolutely being clueless about it. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to create a config that would allow other writers to just install NeoVim, install this init.lua file, and essentially have an integrated writing environment with that. That integrated writing environment would allow them to either take notes at a very simplistic level, write manuscripts on LaTeX, write nonfiction books using org mode, and it would allow them to have a Zettelkasten. Are you familiar with the Zettelkasten concept, Christian?
That's a wonderful point that you're touching there. I even purchased a course, and I'm like, I don't get this shit. I'm like, I tried it. I wanted to try it, but let me show you my notes, and you tell me if they are, if I should use that or not.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Sorry, I just had to grab a bottle of water.
Okay.
Yeah, show me your notes.
Okay, so this is an example of my notes. I divide them in files, right? Like this, everything is technical, right? XOA, XOA, XOCLI, XCPNG stuff. And which one can I show you? This one, for example, Bind9. No,
Sure.
hold on. This maybe? Yeah, this. This is fine. Docker, right? So I just keep a table of contents there, and I just keep all the topics in there. I have headings, a lot of subheadings, and I just jump through them like that, right? So
Right.
Zettelkasten, in theory, I would need to have a lot of nodes instead of having a big node. This one is 23,000 lines long, right?
Oh, okay.
2,300. I'm sorry.
2,300. Yeah.
So I watched that course. I was like, I don't get it. And I still don't get it. I don't know if I should use it,
Okay.
if I should stick to this, if it makes sense or not. Anything you want to share there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the way I understood the Zettelkasten system was you have to kind of so you know the person who came up with it, right? This German sociologist,
Yeah.
Nicholas. Yeah. So when he came up, one of the reasons why people were always curious about his Zettelkasten system was because he was incredibly prolific and productive throughout his life. Often he would be, I think he's published several times. He has, I think, a few dozen books that he wrote in his career and so on and so forth. So a lot of people were curious how he did that. And after his death, one of the things that people started to learn was that he kept this analog system that was always had like these slip cards, and these slip cards had index numbers so that they would kind of be referencing one another. So the idea is atomic nodes and unique identifiers, right? You combine those two, you can theoretically make connections between these various slip cards if such a connection was you could conceive of it, right? So essentially what he was building, the way I understood it, was a offline analog Wikipedia of his mind. That's what he was doing, right? And if you think about that, it is I found by thinking about it along those lines, to make the leap into my digital version of my Zettelkasten was so much easier because I understood where, like conceptually things would be connected to one another. I started like exploring that. And I found that essentially what I ended up with over about, since I started the system about 2.5, 3 years ago, what I've ended up with is an incredibly what's this thing? Incredibly lively ecosystem of ideas that interest me, concepts that interest me, that I can expand upon. And because these nodes are they are living nodes, they kind of show the transition or the iteration over time, right? Especially when you combine that with digital technology like Git and whatever markup language that you wanted to use. So on the NeoVim side, I stumbled upon this plugin called VimWiki. I'm going to show a little bit of VimWiki right now. This is my Zettelkasten. You can see this, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's a little bit. There we go. Yep.
Okay, so this is the home page of my Zettelkasten, right? And as you can see, these are all links to various parts of things that I'm interested in. This inbox is where I put in ideas. So this has writing ideas. This has, like stuff I was learning. I was learning some programming stuff, so I would put all that stuff into computer science. There's personal finance, there's, music, visual skills, all of these things that I think were important to me, and I needed to essentially have it written down in an organized kind of way. The Zettelkasten system allowed me to do that. So, for example, because I'm a writer, if I go into this writing ideas, I have writing ideas for books, movies, short stories, poetry, essays, and so on and so forth, right? So if I go at this,
What
I can
is
show
this program that we're looking at right now?
this.
Is this Emacs?
This is NeoWim. This is
Okay.
NeoWide on.
Oh.
Have you seen the? Yeah, this is NeoWide, right? So
I noticed it
basically
was
use my
really
Z-
smooth. So I was like,
Yeah,
what
it's,
is okay?
it's super smooth.
Yep.
I use it for my Zettelkasten because it's incredibly smooth and doesn't have the janky scrolling that
Yep.
most terminals have, right? So I really enjoy it for that because it almost gives me the sense that I'm using a dedicated app, right? And it's even though it's not, it's just NeoWide running my Zettelkasten system in itself, right? And so essentially, I can just spend an entire day just going through stuff like this. Oh, this is what I was working on. You know, it will have dates and times showing exactly at what point the story came up. All of that stuff is very much here. And if I start like, okay, so I'm like again, I can go back into books here. If I go back into books, I have things to do with my. Okay, this is another book that I'm working on. As you can see, these are the kind of notebooks that writers would have, right? They're having, you know, stuff to do with characters, stuff to do with plot. The structure of the novel is here, and the really cool part about NeoVim, or rather VimWiki, is it allows for this function called let me see, it's called VimWiki to HTML and browse, right? So what happens with that is I'll show you. It looks like this. I essentially have an entire website of all these nodes. VimWiki allows me to export all those nodes in HTML format, and they become a hyperlinked website. So this whole idea of Zettelkasten immediately is now, you know, a real thing. It's been interconnected, and I don't necessarily need to be on NeoWeb. I would have this hosted on a VPS, which I can access through my phone. So even if I'm not near my laptop, I have these notes with me. So the same things, right? Writing ideas. So you already saw this through the NeoVim interface, but this is essentially the website version of it. I essentially have all of this at my backend call, right? Poetry stuff is here. Yeah, it's just like very useful in that in these kind of ways. So this is essentially notes for the film that I was working on 3 years ago. And once again, you can see the evolution of ideas here because it has the dates and so on and so forth. It essentially serves as, for me, as a production diary for the entire film. I know it was on this day that I finalized on the edit. It was on this day that I knew how I was going to cut a certain sequence. These are the notes I sent to my music director. These were the color grade notes I had for my color gradists. Yeah, so so the Zettelkasten system has long term but also short term benefits. On the short term, it allows you to dump your ideas into a format that ages well because it's plain text, right? But because the VimWiki plugin is built from this idea of interconnectability of nodes, combine that with the fact that it's in plain text, it also then now you have the basis for something that evolves with you over time. So in the case of this production, the production of my film, I was able to trace where I was at the start of the process and where I was at the end, and I know exactly how I got there because the timestamps also has that capture. Imagine when I am sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but how do
No
you
worries.
find this file? Like, isn't it hard? Like, okay, what was the name of the file that I needed to open to add this? Isn't it too difficult for you to get to this file and start writing there?
No, because NeoVim itself, I mean, no, sorry, give me a second. if I was in the, let's call this the back end of my Zettelkasten, and what you just saw as the front end, right? If this is the back end, I can just search for the file here and say, okay, I'm working on this thing called yeah, and uh, and it will show me all those the things to do with that. So, and if I would need to go to the specific wiki file, here I am.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
I'm already there. So I just use FZF's file picker and FZF grep.
Okay. Wonderful. So you open this file and you edit it and you keep a history of basically everything, like a diary, right?
Yeah, pretty much. So that's an example for how I use it for my writing and so on and so forth. For like, these are my computer science notes. Like once again, during the pandemic, I was basically teaching myself how to program. There is some Linux useful commands that I have here. All of this stuff is useful because I can immediately just jump into certain things that I'm interested in. This is how I taught myself LaTeX, for example. All of this is able to accommodate all of this, whether that is a technical subject or not. It's there, right? And
So you have a
because
main
it's-
subject. The main subject is
Yeah, yeah.
LaTeX. You go
So-
into it.
Yeah, exactly. So this is computer science, right? If I go into computer science, I have all of this under computer science. These were like this, this tiny atomic notes, right? These, I mean, if I show you one like random atomic note, how to swap the caps lock and escape. I didn't know how to do this at that point in time on a Linux machine, right? This is how it's done. So these are the tiny notes, but I also have notes for larger things like programming for writers. This, let me see. Yeah, so this is like larger notes on Python, right? If I go deeper into this, every day, every chapter is covered, and I'm able to kind of revisit those notes at any point when I am revising, or if I feel like my Python is a little rusty.
Okay.
But it's really great for that. But it has its limitations, and I think where the limitations, if I go back into this, say if I want to show you the same computer science notes. Okay, let's see if I go to Python here. Okay, right. All this is great, but you can see most of the writing is in bullet point form, and I can't really expand this beyond tiny bullet points. And one of the reasons I kind of moved all my research notes into org mode was because it has what I feel as probably the best implementation of the Zettelkasten system there is, and it's called org row. It's basically built on top of org mode itself, and I will show that over the course of time. But it's basically an Emacs thing, and it looks like essentially I'm able to search here, right? So if this is let's say if I want to go to Emacs. This is my Emacs notes itself. This is basically my Zettelkasten, but inside Emacs using org row. And with org row, what I'm able to do is almost visualize. It basically gives me the Obsidian-like functionality of these network diagrams. So if I was to move from
And is that Emacs, that diagram?
that diagram is inside my browser. It's basically just building it on my browser itself.
Okay.
So if I say masterclass, you will see it moves with it. It's basically I think some sort of like JavaScript and Lisp working together. So here you can see the connection of nodes. If I were to do, let's say writing ideas, if I go to writing ideas, it shows what is connected to it as well. So right now I'm basically taking down notes on I'm essentially just preparing for a new production, and I want to uh, go into the writing of the script with a little bit of freshness and maybe some uh, advice from more well-established screenwriters. So one of my favorite screenwriters is this guy called Aaron Sorkin, right? So Aaron Sorkin has this masterclass on screenwriting or a masterclass on screenwriting rather. Again, I'm able to have all of these notes there, and if I was to go and click on this, you have this entire notes is very much there inside my browser as well.
Okay.
So, do you see what I'm saying? It seems it's a lot more powerful than the what WinWiki is. I love WinWiki for what it is. I still use it, but I feel like with Org Roam, I have found exactly what it is that I wanted to look, what I wanted from the start itself. These are essentially notebooks for a film. A book I'm working on. You can see references are here. You are able to see the what is this, the hierarchical nature and how it has been organized. I am essentially putting together a computer science fiction book. So a lot of the research here is about the early days of Lisp and the early days of artificial intelligence in the 1960s and so on and so forth. So I needed to do a lot of research, and I found WinWiki wasn't able to accommodate that level of detail, whereas Org does a very good job of it. And the best part is Orgroom's export function is really simple. I'm just going to show you how it's done. HO. You can get this in PDF as well, but if that happens, oh, sorry, that's weird. Give me a second. There you go. Yeah. As you can see, it produces a web page of the entire thing, and it's really cleanly rendered document. The architecture is very simple. I can just jump into various parts of it. It also exists in PDF form, so I'm going to show you what the PDF looks like. Let's see if I have it. Do you see this? Yeah.
Yep.
This is what a typical notebook that is. So the Org-Roam note, if I was to export into PDF, this is what it looks like. As you can see, it's super clean. The PDF itself is super clean, and I can revisit these notes tomorrow, 10 years from now, probably 50 years from now, if I'm still alive. I can still revisit these notes and know exactly what my thinking process was at that point in time. So that's pretty much one of the great advantages of this. The other reason for me to sorry, we'll get to that later. Does that answer your question on why org mode?
Yeah, why org mode? And I do have a question. Why
Sure.
not org to write a book? Why did you decide to go with LaTeX to write the book?
Yeah. So org mode would make for, I think, a perfect markup language for writing non-fiction, because especially if it's a textbook, right? Like a textbook, or a note or research notes or so on and so forth. It's really great because you would have a very simple, the structure would be fairly obvious, because what you're trying to do in a non-fiction or textbook format is to be as clear and as concise as possible to your readers, right? Whereas with the novel, you are not necessarily bound to the outlining process. Sometimes you have to go into these darker corners where you don't know exactly what it is you're looking for, right? And org mode isn't necessarily great when you don't know what it is that you're looking for. Whereas LaTeX, I mean, before I go into LaTeX, I would have done a lot of my work, in evaluating a story in something like this, right? In a scenario like this, I would have written all of this stuff beforehand, and by the time I'm ready to commit it into LaTeX, I already know what the structure is, and I already have an idea of if the structure of the novel requires the typography to adapt to the various types of storytelling. And if that is the case, org mode doesn't really work. At least not. I don't know how it can accommodate different typographic architectures or different fonts. I don't know if it can. Whereas LaTeX can. And LaTeX also can accommodate different languages. Whereas org mode, when I try to write in my native language and then try to export it, there is usually a problem with the compilation. Whereas when I do it as pure LaTeX, it's just fairly straightforward.
Okay. So LaTeX is really flexible. Then, since it's just code, you can do whatever you want, wherever in the document.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And the LaTeX for me is very much like Emacs in that it has a very high entrance spot, right? It asks a lot to enter it, right? But once you enter it, once you jump over that first wall, you can figure it out. And Emacs is very much the same. I guess even Vim is very much the same, but compared to Emacs, maybe Vim is a little easier on people than that. And I think LaTeX is it's not a text editor, but my point is as a markup language, LaTeX is worth learning if you have a specific use case for it. And if you don't have a specific use case for it, Markdown or org mode. I would be more strongly in favor of talking about people taking their writing from Markdown to org mode as opposed to taking it from Markdown to LaTeX. Because LaTeX is just going to ask for too much, and in most people's cases, they don't need it.
Okay, wonderful. Now, something that I've been doing lately in NeoVim is images. Let me this images in Neo. I use images in my blog post, so I paste them in NeoVim. I convert them to AVIF, with a key map, and I can view them now in NeoVim. Do you do that in org and in LaTeX?
I haven't. I don't. Have I put any images into my? My LaTeX. Not my LaTeX. LaTeX usually doesn't have any sort of diagrams in it. But I think if you look at my PDFs.
There we go. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. Now, inside Emacs, apparently there is a way where I can see the images inside Emacs itself. I haven't really had a need to do it. I just like before Kitty and NeoVim allowed for the display of images, we just basically put the image link format, right? And then we expect it to render, right? I do the same with Emacs to this day. Because most of the time I'm not really interested in incorporating images into my notebooks or my manuscripts.
Okay.
At least I don't have a need for it yet.
Yeah, I use images in my blog post sometimes because it's difficult to explain a lot of stuff writing it. I just put an image there, and that covers paragraphs. Yeah. Okay. And when would you use Markdown, or when do you use Markdown?
I haven't used Markdown in a few months. I am pretty much steeped inside LaTeX and org mode these days. Most of the time, let me just see. No, I am. All my work is at the moment. Let's see. Indeed, no. Yeah. let me see. Mostly it's yeah, MD. Yeah, it's mostly
Org.
ORG format. I like almost all of it is now ORG, unless I'm working on a specific manuscript and I have like finalized all the research work and I'm ready to put it into LaTeX. Everything is inside org mode for the time being.
Okay. I'm into Markdown a lot. Everyone's telling me
Yeah,
to switch to org. Yeah, but Markdown is my thing. And but I do see that it's, we could say, inferior, if I compare it to org. Are there any compatibility issues or caveats with org? Because Joshua Blaze, he told me that if you want
yeah.
to create a README in GitHub, you can do it in the .org extension.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. Because I think GitHub now renders ORG files natively, I think, along with Markdown. And honestly, for most of the Emacs repositories, all the READMEs are in ORG. They're hardly ever in Markdown. At least not that I've seen. And personally, I've like I said, I've moved on from Markdown, and I haven't had a need to go back to it, because, like I said, I feel like the happy middle ground between LaTeX insane power and Markdown's simplicity is org mode, because org mode can be simple if it needs to be, or it can be incredibly complex if it needs to be as well. And org mode also comes with LaTeX integrations, right? You can put in, for example, if I was writing notes for a technical subject and I wanted to include a formula, and again, org mode doesn't support it natively, but it does support for LaTeX. It does support LaTeX, so you can use LaTeX to create the formula and then export it into org mode itself. So it has the best of both worlds. I don't know if Markdown can go into that level of complexity.
Okay. The only compatibility with the...
I'm not trying to like take you away from Markdown, right?
I'm thinking about
fight
it.
Fight for Markdown, man. Fight for Markdown. It's a great format in itself.
No, but you're saying completely the opposite with all your actions.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But I'm being truthful though. Because like I was trying to think when last time I used Markdown, and I just cannot. Like I can perhaps let's see.
I guess the only compatibility issue would be with other people, right? So if you want to share a file with someone else and they get an org file, they're like, "What's this shit? I want a Markdown file," right?
Yeah, exactly. But then again, if you were on, I'm not saying you should be, but if you were doing org on Emacs and you say Control C, Control E, one of the export options is Markdown as well. So I'm just saying.
Okay.
I have a feeling here that I'm someone who spoke at a Vim conference 3 times, right? And now I'm just like being so evangelical about Emacs. I'm sure to get a lot of like hate mail, I think, after this.
So next year is gonna be Emacs Conf, not NeoVim Conf.
Let's see.
Okay.
Let us see.
And have you used this other tool for note taking, Obsidian? Do you have any thoughts on it?
I mean, I did, but and Obsidian's killer feature was the network node graph. Emacs does that for me, as you can see. So I really didn't need to go back to Obsidian. Like until recently, I wanted everything to be inside NeoVim. Now I want everything to be inside Emacs, and in some cases, like even without me thinking about it, someone has actually like created all the things that I would possibly need on Emacs. Whereas when I first came into Vim, I had to kind of flail around to find
Create.
solutions that were
Yep.
specific for writers, right? Whereas with Emacs, there's so much just already in the ecosystem for writers and writing. So I just had to kind of bring it together, and I like the amount of time I spent configuring Emacs is, I would say, like if I was to, I would say I would have spent at least close to 200 to 300 hours on configuring NeoVim over the years, right? Whereas I don't think I've spent more than a day
On
at
Emacs.
most on Emacs, because
It's already there.
everything was already there. I had to just look for some certain functionality, and either it wouldn't be there or it was available as some sort of package, right? That's it. So whereas with NeoVim, and with Vim, I had to look around. I also had to see if there was some sort of way, because Emacs has plenty of people or writers who have already spoken about its powers for years, right? For years and years and years, right? Like everyone from the science fiction author, oh my gosh, I knew I was going to forget his name, right? I'll give you a second. Science fiction writer Neil Stevenson, right? Now he's a avowed Linux and Emacs user for decades, right? So he's been using it for decades. But whereas when I came into Vim and NeoVim, I didn't find many people, certainly not someone of like Neil Stevenson's caliber, who was using anything to do with Vim, right? So, and because I was so drawn to Vim, I realized, okay, I'm just going to figure out what were the plugins I needed to kind of replicate this integrated writing environment, and I was going to put it together. And if another writer somewhere wanted to have the same kind of functionality, I'd have done the work for them. They wouldn't have to go from scratch. Whereas with Emacs, even before I was, looking around for it, I remember seeing this thing called Emacs Writing Studio, which is basically something that's been refined over the last, I don't know, 10 years, I think. Someone has been putting this together. Neil Stevenson has his own Emacs config that he's been using it to write his manuscripts for decades. My point is, for people like me, especially like writers, Emacs is easily extensible for our needs in a way that NeoVim and Vim necessarily weren't, right? And that's why I think I took so much longer to put together this integrated writing environment on NeoVim. Whereas when I came into Emacs, and once that whole thing about Emacs and the way its key bindings are structured, once that bulb, I had that light bulb moment, everything else, the ecosystem was already there. So I didn't have to spend time like looking and all of that stuff, right? And I think we mentioned this when we spoke as well. Lisp is so much easier for someone like me who's a non-programmer to work with, because I seem to understand it so much easier than I do Lua. Now that's in no way, a reflection of the language itself. I am not a programmer, right? But from a non-programmer's eyes and my comprehension of code, Emacs Lisp, is so much easier for me than Lua was. And when you get something wrong with Lua, your entire NeoVim config just collapses on itself, right? Whereas with Emacs, like I haven't done anything. Like I've been playing around with eLisp a lot, and nothing I've done has made the scaffolding crash on itself. It's always just remain, because
The errors on the entire screen.
Yeah, exactly, right. And it seems to I'm saying it seems to understand. It seems to be built in such a way where you can the idea of hot swapping in hardware, right, where you can swap certain components without having to restart or shut down or anything of that nature. With NeoVim, I could never hot swap. maybe it's me. It's not Neovim, it's me, right? Because I'm not a programmer. Whereas with Emacs, I can easily hot swap. I can change code and immediately I just press Control X, Control E, evaluates the buffer, and the new settings have been
Are applied.
absorbed. Yeah, applied, right? And it's just incredibly fast that way. Uh, yeah. So, yeah, I think that's one of the reasons for me. Emacs is now where I can't see myself ever leaving Emacs, right? Org mode is the reason to come, but org Rome is probably the reason that I will stay in Emacs for for a long time.
Okay. And yeah, Emacs has been around for so long that
Yeah,
everything has been thought of already, right? So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like just to
yeah,
get my headings and my markdown files like this,
yeah,
I did have to
yeah,
spend some time to figure it out. And I didn't know that
yeah.
Emacs had this type of headings, right? So I, without knowing,
Mm.
mirrored Emacs headings in Neovim, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Realized until later.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, I have some reflections to do on
yeah,
Emacs and org and all that stuff. So
yeah, yeah.
are you fully into Emacs now? Or
Yeah,
you still
I
use
mean,
Neovim?
so right now my Neovim is I use Neovim purely for LaTeX because it's so much faster than Emacs. That's pretty much the only reason I am now on Neovim. My Zettelkasten is also now moved into Org. So I don't even the Zettelkasten that I showed you on Vim, I hardly use that. I use the Org version instead.
And how do you
I
do
also write
before
script.
I forget this? When you migrate from a tool to another, right? Because I used Google Docs for many years and it sucked.
Okay.
Was horrible. All of my
Yeah.
notes from I don't know for the past for a lot of years are in Google Docs. You know, text,
Okay.
images. To open one of those files, I don't know. It takes like 2 minutes for it to load
Yeah.
properly because they're huge
Yeah.
files,
Yeah.
a lot of
They're huge
information.
files.
It's
Yeah.
horrible. I
Yeah.
didn't migrate them to Neovim. I only migrate the stuff that I need into the new
Mm.
editor that I'm
Mm.
on. Do you do the
Mm.
same or do you migrate all the old stuff? Because there's usually a lot of trash there.
Um, so if you're talking about my manuscripts that existed in rich text format inside Microsoft Word, I I I had to convert all of those into plain text. That took me about 2 to 3 weeks of just painstakingly. It was not just a case of like, okay, this document, convert it into plain text and move on. I couldn't do that. I had to like go through years and years of files and research notes that I've had put together for my novels, and I had to suddenly move them all into plain text format. So I did spend a good 2 weeks doing that, and that 2 week period kind of helped me understand how plain text work, how version control works, and because of that, once I put either Vim or Emacs on top of that plain text layer, what I have is incredibly fast search, incredibly fast access to all these files. The flexibility that comes is there's no point even comparing it. Like I understand why certain people would want to be in those formats, but those formats are incredibly limiting if you are not in a collaborative enterprise environment. Then I don't see why you should.
Mm. And you migrate everything then, even stuff that you probably will not use anymore. You migrate all of your notes from the old platform.
I, yeah, because I was very good at how I kept the notes. Because I was
Mm.
incredibly paranoid about. Because one of the things is, if you go back to pre-digital note keeping and all that stuff, I never had good handwriting, and I never could I was always losing my stationery, the pens, and I was losing my notebooks and all of that stuff. So because of that, when I started working on digital media, especially when I realized my writing was going to be my, the thing I was going to do as far as my, what's this, livelihood was concerned, I became very serious about how I kept those notes. So they were always very well named, and they were kept in certain places, and they were always very organized. What they didn't have, and what I kept wondering if such a thing even existed, was this magical save button where I could see, what changes I made on this day to this document and so on and so forth. And I thought that was technology that doesn't even exist until I came across Git. And then I had this mind blowing moment where I was like, holy fuck, this is exactly what I was thinking about. This is exactly what I wanted. So, are you telling me all I have to do in order to have this magical save button was to convert everything into plain text? Yeah, fuck it, I'll do it. So I spent 2 weeks just like converting everything because the record keeping was already very thorough. Converting it meant I knew everything was important. There was nothing that was going to be like trash or throwaway stuff. Because as writers, sometimes I write what I know is going to be trash today is something I can revisit 10 years down the line, and I would have figured it out because it was gestated over time. All I needed to do was to make sure that I had written it down, and once I put it down in some sort of digital format as opposed to analog, because once again I was losing my analog notes and so on and so forth. So once I put it down into an analog format, I knew it existed. I knew it was somewhere in my files or in my inbox. Now, of course, I don't have to think about it like that. I have to just think about it as my giant mono repo of manuscripts and screenplays, all written in plain text. And if it's not plain text, it's rendered into either HTML or PDF. Either way, I have the portability of the files is guaranteed. I can read it on any device, and I don't have to be locked into some sort of vendor's thing. Can I just show one extra thing as far as Emacs is concerned? This what you're looking at right now is essentially Emacs screenplay writing ability. You can write screenplays as well through fountain format. Once again, you can do this on Neowin. You can do this on my integrated writing environment, OviWrite as well. But Emacs comes, like the version of Emacs that I got and the config that I got, I just had to say add fountain through Emacs itself, as opposed to look for the plugin and all of that stuff. And yeah, I can write screenplays as well. So screenplays, research notebooks, Zettelkastens, LaTeX, pretty much everything. Emacs has inbuilt solution for it, and that's why I can't kind of move away from it anymore.
What are your fans gonna say? Does that worry you a little bit?
You're talking about my friends who are like, oh, right. Oh, that's going to be interesting when they see this, and because I'm like I said, I've been a speaker at the conference 3 times now, so I'm part of the Discord where all those guys are there, including. I don't know if you've seen these guys, TJ Dries, so TJ and Prime and all these guys are on this Discord. I don't go often much. I don't know if they'll even see or hear about it, but if they do, it'll be interesting reactions. It'll be interesting reactions.
Oh man, yeah. And you mentioned as well that you still use Neovim for LaTeX.
LaTeX.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why?
It's so much faster. If I was to just show, and I don't know why it's faster, right? Because the one thing I haven't still figured out with Emacs is its LaTeX support. And every time I tried it, I'm not even going to show it because sometimes what happens is it tends to hang for LaTeX files, and I still haven't figured out why. Supposedly, according to searching on Google and using AI, supposedly there is some piece of code that talks about how Emacs is supposed to render PDF that is incorrect on my config file. I haven't still figured out what that is, and everything I tried changing, it doesn't work. So for the time being, it's this. The experience on Emacs for LaTeX is incredibly slow. I think the LSP is also working in the background, and if like the input becomes slower, everything is much slower on Emacs for LaTeX for whatever reason. And I know it's nothing to do with Emacs. It's probably how I've set it up that I need to refine. But I'm currently in the middle of writing this, and I don't want to take more time away from the writing of the manuscript, and just focus on configuring my text editor. It's absolute madness to do that. So I'm going to finish this manuscript, and the next one when I start the next manuscript when I start on LaTeX, I'm going to make sure my Emacs is primed for LaTeX as well.
Okay, and there's multiple ways to run Emacs. You can just start the GUI, the app itself,
Yeah.
or you can run it from the terminal. How do you use it, and
Yeah.
why?
What you're seeing right now when I show you Emacs is always on GUI mode, and the reason for that is because it can read PDFs and it can read EPUBs. So if I show you EPUB, yeah, these are two EPUBs that I have. I'm working on my writing of. I'm writing some Sri Lanka related story at this point, and I needed references. These are two ebooks, right? And I have ebooks opened inside Emacs. Again, these are not things that you can do inside NeoVim at all. You can also read PDFs and so on and so forth. So in order to do that, you have to be on Emacs GUI and not Emacs terminal. So I prefer Emacs. I prefer Emacs GUI, to be honest. And it really is not. It's super fast, except when it comes to LaTeX, which I haven't figured out yet.
Okay, the speed. Since you know about Neovite, I have used Neovite. I do like it a lot. Is it comparable to Neovite, the Emacs GUI app, or is it a little bit slower? Is it a little bit laggy?
So it's imperceptibly slower than Neovite. And I think it's because, again, I'm not a computer science guy, right? So you will have to correct me if I'm wrong. Neovite is written in Rust, right? So it's supposed to be faster anyway. That's how I understand Rust. The Rust programming language, and Emacs is single-threaded. So it has certain, I don't know, from what I've read, the technical reasoning has always been that it's single-threaded, and because of the single-threaded nature of Emacs, it's not going to fly as fast as, say, NeoVim or Neovite rather, but it's certainly going to be, orders of magnitude faster than Microsoft Word.
Yep. Okay. And if you compare it to Neovim, regular Neovim in your regular terminal, would you say Emacs is a little bit slower?
Yeah,
based on your
slightly
experience.
so, but yeah, slightly so. Yeah,
Okay. But still,
yeah,
you
because
can work on it, right? No issues.
I can work on it, and the thing is, it's the trade-off, right? What am I gaining for that loss of, marginal amount of speed that NeoVim has over Emacs? I'm getting the ability to read EPUBs. I'm getting all of those things that come with org mode and org roam. I'm getting fountain support. I'm getting calendar support. If I want, I can browse the web inside. There's a built-in browser inside, especially if I want go into Wikipedia, so on and so forth. It's that easy, right? It's kind of ridiculous in that sense. it's also kind of funny because like Richard Stallman made Emacs, right? And he's always a guy who's like, Unix philosophy, one thing has to do this one thing properly and nothing more. And then he creates Emacs, which is trying to do everything and more. And it's just, it's kind of nutty, but it's great. It's great at the same time. Because every day you find some new thing that that Emacs can do, and you're like, oh, that's cool.
Interesting. Okay. Wonderful. So we lost you already. Emacs. From now on.
I think so. Yeah, man. Like once I sort out the LaTeX part, yeah,
you're gone.
Like I'm pretty much done on NeoWim. Like it would. The thing is, I still use evil key bindings, right? So I am using Vim key bindings inside Emacs because I still think the Vim's text editing prowess is just mind blowing. It's probably the most efficient use of your keyboard if it's QWERTY keyboard that you have. I don't know what it's like on the other keyboards, but for QWERTY keyboard user, Vim key bindings seem like the most natural thing in the world, right? So I still use Vim key bindings inside Emacs. I rarely use Emacs vanilla key bindings. Once in a while, I turn off evil just be like, can I do Emacs Emacs
the vanilla
key bindings by myself? Yeah, and it's okay. It's all right because I've had to like reconfigure my keyboard so that the control key is no longer the pinky finger, right? And it's not in this corner here. So once you do all those like little things. So right now for me, my control key is both my is caps lock. So caps lock is both escape and control. So it's escape if I just short press it. It's control if I But if I control like if I press it for a long period along with another key, it's control. My enter key is both control as well as an enter. All right, and that too. So both pinkies on either side has a control. Yeah, has a control key on either side, right? My meta key for my Mac is on both sides of this thing. So the both sides of the spacebar has a meta key as well in case I can use the other finger as well. So that's how deeply I've gotten into this whole Emacs life. It's kind of sad, but it's actually been a lot of fun as well. Like I'll be honest, it's been a lot of fun. I enjoy being in front of Emacs, and I enjoy studying and doing research with Emacs as my companion app because it allows me to do all of that. I can schedule my classes inside my own notebook, which is kind of silly if you think about it, right? Like it shouldn't, no notebook should be able to schedule classes and be all of those things, but I can with this. So I think that's the reason I kind of moved on, and I kind of like completely decided Emacs is the way. But Vim key bindings, Vim editing, modal editing is the thing that is a must. Without it, because that makes all the difference in the world as well.
Yeah,
it's genuinely some of the whoever thought about those key bindings, absolute genius, right?
Yeah.
Absolute genius, man.
Yep. Have you heard about this language server, Harper? I had an interview with Elijah the other day.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I've tried using Harper. It's not worked out well for me because once again, it's me. It's not Harper. I haven't understood the configuration stuff yet with Harper, which is why it hasn't worked out well for me. I'll probably figure it out when I'm not in the midst of like a production. Right? Yeah. If it's right now, I'm in the midst of writing a novel as well as getting pre-production for my next film. So I just don't want to be caught up in hacking a NeoWim at this point or Emacs at this point, which is nuts.
Yeah, I know how it is. When I have to come up with a new solution, it's like I put it off for as long as I can. And one day I just decided to do it but it takes time. I know that I'm
Yeah.
going to spend at least
Yeah.
4 or 5 hours, and it sucks
Yeah.
going through the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. And my partner is also like, my partner would sometimes look at me and be like, that doesn't look like writing, because she'll see my screen, and I was like, it's not writing. Like, and she's like, I mean, like, she'd be like, listen, I'm not dating you because you are this, programmer in disguise. I'm dating you because you're a novelist. So I'm like, yeah. And so it's her way of hinting that I need to finish my books, instead of like, this, whatever. She has no clue what this is. She's just be like, I have no idea what you're doing, but I know you're not working on your manuscript. Can you finish the fucking manuscript, please? Yeah.
Yeah, I completely get it. Everyone watching this video is for sure gonna get it. We have all gone through that, and it's painful and it's not enjoyable. Yeah. So
It's not. It's not.
I would like to know how it goes with Harper, someone that writes professionally. I would like to know what you think about it if you decide to use it in the
Yeah.
future with Emacs, because it's available for Emacs, Neovim, and
Yeah, I
everywhere
know.
else.
Yeah.
I do basic writing, and it helps me with my markdown
Okay.
notes, but I don't do
Okay. Oh,
writing professionally. Yep.
yeah. Yeah.
And note taking tool, I guess that's Emacs now. Is that right? Org.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or grow. So
Okay.
org mode or grow on top of it.
Okay. ID Emacs.
Emacs.
Okay. Okay.
Emacs.
Wonderful.
Emacs.
And
yeah.
you have a few repos that you maintain as well. OVWrite being
Yeah.
one of them. What's
Yeah.
the status of that? Like, what's gonna happen to OVWrite?
So override, right now I have failed in my duties as a maintainer. I haven't had a chance to look at some of the pull requests that's been coming my way, or all the issues tab as well. Thankfully, there are like about a dozen users, I think, who are regular users who keep emailing me for tech support and so on and so forth. Like, you can see the issues page, right? There's about 6 issues or 4 issues there. Some of it are fixed. I think most of this are fixed, but there's still people having some technical issues. But the good thing is, because there are about 10 or 12 regular users, they've taken it upon themselves to help out any new users coming with any sort of technical issues. So that's been happening. I recently attended to some long overdue pull requests that was like piled up. So there's about 5 or 6 pull requests from users, which is great.
But you're a
but
writer. What are you doing with pull requests, GitHub,
I
and all
know,
that stuff?
I know,
What would your
I know,
partner
I know,
say
I know.
about it?
I know. It's part of the reason is because every time I go into the pull request, I'm like, if she gets to know I'm doing this shit instead of writing, I'm just like, I mean, I'll be like, I'm just like, being a little nerd here and there, and she'll be like, that's great, but finish the book. Finish the fucking book, right? So it's right now, it's just finish the fucking book, and you can play around with your. Like, she still thinks these are toys that I play with, right? Like, it's my nerdy toys that I am working with, and I'm like, okay, you think of it that way, nerdy toys it is.
Yeah, but it's actually the way that makes you write better, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but you
Yeah.
have to go deep into the weeds. That's the thing.
That's the thing. Yeah, and the thing is, like, I've always found it very strange that if you think about musicians and if you think about athletes, right, all of them will have, I mean, a musician will have a certain instrument or instruments that they have handpicked and, like, like used it in performance, in the studio or on stage, and they are especially drawn to for its tonal qualities and so on and so forth, right? Like, guitarists would be sentimentally attached to certain guitars, drummers the same, and you would also have the feedback from the makers of the drummers and guitarists who would create signature versions of those instruments so that it's tailor made for their way of playing their music. I've always thought it was really strange that writers don't have that sort of you know, like narrow focus on the tools that allow them to write. Everyone's like, all writers are like, okay, Microsoft Word, okay, this shitty keyboard, okay, we'll use all of these things. And I always found it very strange that we accept that the status quo of technology that's meant for writing, and we do it so meekly, and we do it so like passively. Yeah, okay, okay, Google Sheets. Okay, yeah, okay, that sort of shit, right? And I really found that strange with most writers, that they would be okay with that sort of thing, because I think if you are very concerned about your craft, you'd also be very concerned about the tools that you use in expressing your craft, right? Which is part of the reason that I went on this journey in the first place, and which is how I kind of ended up in Emacs in this. But I always found it strange when writers tell me, why are you so obsessed with a writing tool? You're just writing. And I'm like, why are you not obsessed with it? Because this
Why
is
do you
the thing
accept the
that's...
shit that they give you, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. How are you okay with this sort of nonsense, right? And but then I also have to accept the fact that most writers don't have the technical uh, knowledge or the bloody persistence. Like, you need a combination of both. I have enough technical capability, I think, to understand the open source landscape, what sort of libraries go in where, and all of that stuff. For whatever reason, I get it. I get it enough to be able to follow conversations, follow tutorials, and get my way into this. But it's also combined with persistence. Like, bloody minded persistence is also required, right? But then again, the bloody minded persistence comes because I care about my craft so much
Yep.
that I should inevitably care about my tools.
Yep.
If I didn't care about my tools, like that, for me, that means I don't care about my craft. That's
Yeah.
how I see it, right?
You would have to be
and-
suffering with Word for sure.
yeah. I mean, and honestly, I might as well stop writing if that was the case. No, seriously.
It does it give you superpowers? Like, you're a writer basically with superpowers. If there's something you want to do, you can implement it, which is not something that everyone can do, right? Which makes you a
Yeah,
better
yeah.
writer in the long run, right?
I mean, I hope so. I mean, like, because what it does for me, especially, I'm speaking about NeoVim right now, but I'm speaking about Vim editing modes, right? Because that's the thing that I carried forward into Emacs as well. Because the Vim editing, modal editing, is a superpower, because it allows you to write, edit, and for me at least, write, edit, and world build almost at the speed of thought. Because once the key bindings become internalized, I'm not even thinking about like, okay, how do I get the cursor here? I automatically know it, right? So almost like I'm like a pianist at this point. I know what note to, like, if I press a certain key, what note I'm going to hear. And I know that consistency it has carried forward inside Emacs as well. So now, when in those rare moments where, for example, a client sends a Word document and I have to edit on that, I find myself pressing J, right? Okay, and I have to be like, okay, I'm not on Vim. I'm in this shitstorm right now.
It's
I just
inferior.
have to, like, I have to just turn off my Vim these things, and just, like, I had to use an arrow key, because otherwise in a Word document I have to use an arrow key, right? And it's ridiculous, but I'm going to have to use a arrow key, right? And I can't, like, jump from the top of the document to the this thing. I can't do any of that stuff. But it's very frustrating.
I tried to
Sorry?
explain this to my wife, the
Uh-huh,
emotions.
okay.
And she's like, you're just talking shit. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And I try to explain to her, no, but look, there's this modes, and I can go into normal mode, and that means that I can move my cursor around, and then really
Yeah.
easily I type a key and I can start writing. I try to explain it, in basic terms, and for
Sure.
she to get it, she didn't get it.
Yeah.
She's like, doesn't make
Yeah.
any sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I don't think I think that anyone who first comes across modal editing is going to be like taken aback, right? Because my first interaction with Vim was during the pandemic when I was setting up my media server and I needed to change some configuration file. Following a tutorial, and the tutorial said use Vim to open to this configuration file, and I just couldn't use any of the keys. I it just confused the complete shit out of me. And then I remember I restarted the server 2 or 3 times, thinking there's something wrong with this server. And it's only months, not months, like a few attempts later that I realized, oh, you could quit with :Q. Right. Okay. Cool. I know how to quit Vim now. Right. And it went from that. And then it was just like, why would anyone do this? And it went from why would anyone do this to why isn't everyone else doing this? Because it makes complete sense, right? And yeah, but you can't try explaining that to people who are not going to be, no, it's not.
It's not possible to explain. They don't get it. And why
Yeah.
didn't you stop with Vim there? Like, why didn't you say? Because it happened to me as well. I think it happens to all of us, right? Following a tutorial, edit network config file, setting a static IP address in a server. It was, and the guy opened Vim, and he explained how to write, quit, and all that. It was kind enough, so I was able to quit. But I thought, this is trash. I don't like this. I'm not gonna get used to this. I'm
Yeah,
never gonna
yeah.
use this again. Why did you continue with Vim? Why didn't you stop there?
Because I'll show you. I found out that you could use Vim on Android through Termux, and which meant along with version control, I had my manuscripts with me on my phone, and I had the same functionality that of the same. I had the same software Vim on the phone along with my manuscripts, and I could on the phone jump around my documents really fast, right? And so that made the very fact that it was available in 2 different platforms, my Linux platform at that time and my this thing, and it meant my writing environment was the same. So I realized I could make my writing environment the same on my computer as well as my phone. And then it was like, okay, if I can do that, can I write screenplays? Can I do this? Can I do that? Can I do that? And I kept adding shit into it until it became like a full-fledged thing where I could find files or grep sentences or do all those fancy things that programmers do, but to my prose documents, and I could do it. And when I started doing that, I just remember thinking, there's no way that anyone's ever going to convince me Microsoft Word is a better way of doing these things, because the same manuscript, right? The manuscript I showed you, if I open the same manuscript on a doc format and I was to open it, it'll take a minute and a half to open it because it's 300 plus pages right now. That's number one. It would be either at the very top of the document or at the very bottom. Now, what if I was working on a section that's at the very center of it? I can't, in Vim, I can put a mark saying this is mark 8. So even if I come back to it, I just, press tilde-A and I go back to the exact place where I stopped. Those things make a huge difference when you are writing. Whereas with Word document, I would be scrolling like a monkey, up and down, figuring out, okay, where did I stop? Honestly, a monkey could do it, right? Scrolling up and down a document, even a monkey can do it, right? I don't want to be like that, like that passive monkey just scrolling up and down my document. I want to be able to go exactly where it is that I want to go. And you have to understand that we as writers sometimes work with very brief windows of inspiration. And when that very brief window of inspiration strikes you sometimes, you want to be able to open your manuscript and go exactly where you want to, where that inspiration struck, and you want to be able to
Fast.
go exactly that, yeah, go there and start working immediately. I can't do that on Microsoft Word. Even when I was on Microsoft Word, what if I did have moments where inspiration struck, and this is back in my Windows days, I would just start Notepad, and then on Notepad I will just spit everything out. I'll vomit everything out on Notepad, save that there, and possibly email it to myself with a very detailed subject line and all that stuff. Essentially, like some sort of like primitive version control. That's what I would do. Uh, all that all that kind of primitive monkey like nonsense is gone, and what I have instead is this very sophisticated thing that has been time tested. It's like both Vim and NeoVim have gone through decades of evolution in computer science, right? They've stayed relevant somehow or the other, which means they're doing something right.
Yeah.
And you can make the argument, yeah, sure, they're doing something right, and it's only for programmers. But once you understand that prose can become plain text as well, then the tools that programmers use can be the tools for writers as well, which is essentially how I ended up with Vim at that point in time. And I felt like it was the best tool for allowing me to write, edit, and world build at the speed of thought. Now, of course, and with the same key bindings, I bring that same sort of perspective to Emacs, and it's just as much fun.
Yeah. How many years, ever since you started with Vim on that server, how many years have you dedicated to your config? How many hours? What would you say those hours would translate into years of configuring stuff?
Vim, like I said, so when I started, I was on Vim proper, right? So I had a VimRC that I used for about 3 to 4 months. Then I learned about NeoVim, and I kind of like, how they patch your, if you are coming from Vim background, you can have an init Lua file that kind of uses the same VimRC in order to have, yeah. So I was doing that for a bit as well. Then I realized the plugin ecosystem for NeoVim was a lot more lively than it was for Vim. So I took 2 or 3 plugins from the Vim ecosystem, that was VimWiki and Vim Org Mode and Vim Fountain. Those 3, and everything else I basically used from the NeoVim ecosystem, which is how OviWrite came about. And I was pretty happy with it. Honestly, I was very happy with it. It's just that org mode, I felt there was things about org mode that I needed to discover, and for that I needed to go to Emacs. And in going to Emacs, I discovered all the other things about Emacs, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to stay here. I like it here.
And what percentage would you say that comes to configuring stuff? I know that, for example, stuff that I have to do versus stuff or time that I spend configuring stuff, the time that I spend configuring is high.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think if you remember what I said about Lua versus Lisp, I probably spent, I would estimate close to 300 hours to get to that point where OviWrite, I came to that point where OviWrite was something I could put up in a public project and, help other writers use it as well. So I would estimate about 300 hours. But in that 300 hours, I was able to do a lot of work while it was getting to that point of where it was like an integrated writing environment. Very clear when I said a lot of work, I meant my actual writing work. I could still get a lot of work on it, right? Emacs, with my current config, I barely changed it. It's not even my config. It's basically a config called Emacs Kickstarter for NeoVim users, right? So it's essentially meant for us. All I did was add, for us, NeoVim. Yeah. It's meant for NeoVim people, right? And I think the guy who his name is forgot his name. I think he's also someone who splits his time between both, and I think he saw a common ground. So essentially, the common ground was on the space bar, use of the space bar as leader key, and so on and so forth. Which is how DoomMax and SpaceMax also work. But DoomMax, I felt was a little like the it had like a modular config that requires you to go through too many files in order to be able to fix certain things, right? Whereas this guy was just a single init file. Everything was in one file, and all I had to do was add in four things: Ogrom, Fountain, LaTeX. That's it. Those are the only things he hadn't added. So once I added that, I had everything else.
Yeah.
And
you learned about
yeah.
you learned a lot in Neovim and all of the other tools that you have used. So when you switch to Emacs, it's like, oh, this is really similar to Neovim, right? So it's not as difficult as when you started with Vim for the first time.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And
also one thing that Emacs has is so I'm pretty sure for Neovim you're using LazyGate, right, for your version control.
Yep.
Okay. LazyGate is great. I prefer LazyGate as well, but Emacs has something called Magit.
You wanna show?
Which honestly I haven't still figured out Magit yet. This is what Magit looks like. So as you can see, I still haven't figured out Magit properly, but I use LazyGit, and I compare how both LazyGit and Magit kind of like track my version the same. So I only started using Magit about I'd say about 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
And I still haven't figured it out. So what I usually do is I have LazyGit running alongside it, and I see and I try to kind of like apply the same lessons from LazyGit into Magit. But Magit is supposedly incredibly powerful. Again, I don't need that additional power of like being able to do blames and those kind of things because I don't work on a shared repository at all. But it's pretty great. And I think if you're like, what I've heard from people who work on Emacs on large code bases with other collaborators is Magit is incredible in those scenarios because you're able to kind of like, see contributions and see where, like, especially I think its blame function is supposed to be incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I've heard about that too. Magit. I haven't played with it, but I think I will see what's up. And regarding your repo, what's gonna happen to it? And are you gonna pass the flag? Or
I requested one of the users because I found one single user always helping all the new users with the technical support stuff and all that. So I asked him if he was interested. Unfortunately, his response was, I would love to, Dina, but guess the problem is I've also discovered Emacs. I shit you not, right? It's like I also discovered Emacs, and I'm wondering if I also should move completely to Emacs. I was like, coincidentally enough, I'm in the same place right now.
So you can update the README and delete whatever's in the README and just use Emacs.
Just use Emacs. Like I'm actually wondering if I should just archive the project or because. But there are some like genuinely I've gotten about 24 support requests over the time that 24 unique support requests from people who are like unique users who are using it for their workflow, and I thought that was crazy. Like I honestly, because I remember telling a friend of mine who's actually a software engineer that I have this project where I'm getting pull requests and technical support questions, and he was like, why did you go and do this? Now you're not going to be able to sleep, right? You might have just a couple of dozen users here, but if this thing becomes remotely successful, you do not have any clue what it means to like maintain, a repository in the public domain. You have zero idea about it. Already you're going, and when I told him the other day, I can't keep up with it, he's like, yeah, I told you so. You shouldn't have put this shit out. You shouldn't
Yeah.
have put it out, and you shouldn't have invited other writers to come on board, because he also explained it properly. He's like, listen, not every writer is going to be as persistent as you, nor are they going to come in with that at least certainly above average understanding of technology from a writer's standpoint. So they are going to keep asking you questions over and over and over again. Sometimes it might even look like simple questions that, you know, yeah. So the long-winded answer is I don't know. I might kind of like archive it at some point or the other, but for the time being, it seems like it has a few users who enjoy it, so I'll keep it for the time being.
Okay. Yeah. That's one of the reasons why I haven't switched my .files or my NeoVim config into a repo.
Right.
I just,
Right.
where is it? Let me see. Here. I have everything in my .files, right? So
Right.
the excuse is if someone needs support or if someone wants to change something, it's like, hey, these are my .files, just clone them, change them to your liking. But if I would create a
Yeah.
repo out of my config, I'm pretty sure I would get a lot of requests, and
Mhm.
I don't want to deal with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, man. I wouldn't like it is a responsibility, right? And an actual like responsibility that you need to like take somewhat seriously, and which is why I don't want to give half baked answers. I don't want to like be like, especially when someone, because a lot of the users that I've gotten emails from are Windows users. Now I haven't used Windows since the pandemic, so I have no clue what NeoVim is like on Windows. I have zero clue, right? So and I have no intention of like even installing a virtual machine of Windows to see what it's like. I just do not want to put myself into that visit. So yeah, I feel like I'm doing a bad job right now, and I just need to accept that this is not for me. And it was fun while it lasted. Now I need to like archive it, or just tell someone to fork it and just maintain it on their
Continue.
own.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
if there's someone watching the video still and they use Overwrite, they will probably reach out, and they want to
Yeah,
take
yeah,
the
yeah.
project.
Please. Yeah. I mean, if anyone's interested in taking over, I'll be more than happy to to hand over the reins.
Okay, wonderful. Which operating system do you use?
At the moment, I'm on macOS. I'm on an M1 14-inch macOS. What is this? Sequoia or Sonoma?
Yeah, the
What is
latest
it? Last
one, Sequoia.
Yeah. So, yeah, Sequoia, right? So I'm on Sequoia.
And why did you choose Mac and not Linux? When are you jumping
I-
into the Nix rabbit hole?
So during the pandemic, I jumped into Linux completely, because I was like, I just don't want to be on Windows anymore. So I used Linux throughout 2020, 2021, 2022, and it's only in the midst of 2023 that I got this machine, and that was mostly because I had finished my first film, and it was basically, treat myself for finishing my first film, right? But I edited my entire feature-length film on Ubuntu Studio, running DaVinci Resolve, and all that stuff. So I'll be happy to kind of go back to Linux, but the problem is battery life on laptops for Linux isn't great, not yet. It still gets incredibly hot. I have an XPS from 2018, which has a graphics card as it is, and so when I'm using even light applications, the fans are going,
The
and they're
noise,
really
yeah.
loud, the noise, all of that stuff. Whereas this, with the battery life, I've never heard the fans, I've never seen it get hot. I've thrown all sorts of shit at it. DaVinci Resolve is running in the background. There's a couple of local AI models running in the background. It doesn't seem to complain about anything.
Yeah.
So I kind of yeah, it doesn't complain. It just like it seems to just shrunk its shoulders and just march on, right? I like that fact. I like the fact that it does that. But when I took this Mac, one of the things that I did miss was I missed having a window manager like solution because that's what I was using on my on my Linux. So I got Yabai, I got SKHD, I put janky borders on this, and so I like one of the things I uh, don't like in my operating systems is the operating system to show itself. So as you can see, always like everything to be full screen. I don't want to see I don't want to see the dock. I completely hate the dock as a user interface paradigm.
Yep.
I
It's
loathe
horrible.
it. It's horrible. It takes real estate from the screen, right? I completely loathe it. So I always remove that. I also remove what's this? This one, the top toolbar.
Yep.
It's always hidden because again, I don't want my operating system to show itself. I'd rather it just be in the background, and I just want certain functionality done well. So tiling windows done well, and all the other artifacts of the OS to kind of like be in the background as much as possible. So I use Yabai, SKHD, and Janky borders, and I'm happy with that. And everything else is like keyboard centric workflows essentially. All
You're
that comes
the
from Linux.
Yeah, you're the first person that I talked to that uses Yabai. Well, Josh Medeski used Yabai in the past, but he moved away from Yabai. And I see that you
Oh
use Yabai in stack mode, right? Single application on the screen.
no,
Or
no. I mean, no.
and
I use
BSP.
it. Yeah, I use it in BSP. But when I'm on NeoVim, I mean, the only reason this thing is stacked is because the PDF is live updating as I make changes to the manuscript, right? So I want to see how it looks. That's the only reason. Otherwise, almost all of my yeah, all of them are in full screen most of the time. Like I prefer things to be in completely full screen. And if I really need to call upon anything, I have Raycast for this. Raycast is great because it allows me to have keyboard-centric workflow. So if I say Emacs, for example, Emacs is Alt E opens Emacs, right? Chrome is Alt C. So this is an easy way for me to do this as opposed to have the dock or mission control or any of the other stuff that Mac has. I prefer this way of doing it.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, and let's see, what else do we have here? Okay, your thoughts on Linux. We already know that you have a lot of experience with Linux. Windows, was it your first operating system?
No, I grew up on Mac actually. So I had access to Mac machines in the 80s because my dad was in the publishing industry, right? And he was in the printing industry. So he was digitizing his family business, and how he started digitizing it was with the early Apple machines. So imagine if you remember the very first Macintoshes from the 80s. I had the Apple II, the Apple III growing up. So the single tiny all-in-one computers with just a keyboard and yeah. So those were my first computers growing up. And until I was 18, I didn't have Windows. I was just like my dad was like, "There's a computer at home," and I'd be like, "I can't play video games on this. I can't go online on this because no one in my country knew how to connect dial-up to a Mac back then." Right? Because Mac wasn't, sexy at all at that point, right? I couldn't play any of the CD-ROMs because most of the CD-ROMs were for
For Windows.
PCs. So all my friends would be like playing, like video games on their 286 and 386 machines, and I had these like Mac machines where I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even get online until I was like 19, 20, right? And that's only because my dad was like, okay, finally, here's a what is it, x86. It was a Pentium 3. So that's the Pentium 3. So from Pentium 3 to the i7 9750. So the ninth generation of the i7. Though I was on Windows. After that, I was just I moved to back to Mac.
Oh, and what are your thoughts on Windows now? As of now, do you like it?
Oh my god. Oh my gosh. No, man. Like, no, I sometimes I have to work in client offices where they give me their pre-configured machines or the approved machines, and I'm like, oh my god, I can't do this. I actually said no to a job that requires me to uh, use company issued laptops, and the company issued laptop would all be this, junk Windows machines, right? Not even high end ones. Like it was just these junk plasticky ones that would just die. Like the keyboards are shit. It's Windows 10 having ads being thrown in every direction. I was like, no, fuck, man, I can't do this. I said no. The job was shit. The job wasn't the most challenging thing. The pay was good, but I was like, even for 3 months to work on this shitty laptop on Windows, it's just no,
You
no.
were used to Linux and Mac by then already.
Yeah, yeah, very much space. I even asked him, look, if you're giving me that laptop, can I just flash it? Can I put Linux on it, and I will get all the work that you want done faster than you would get from me from on Windows? And they're like, no, you can't do it. This is corporate protocol and so on and so forth. And I was like,
Yeah, I guess once you try Linux or Mac and you go to the Unix world, going back to
yeah,
Windows is like,
oh fuck,
yeah,
no, yeah.
okay.
Keep me in the Unix world. I'm happier in the world of Unix. If it's Mac, it's great. If it's Linux, it's great. Just don't put me on Windows. I'll probably just like say no.
Yeah, okay, okay. And which terminal are you using right now? Terminal emulator?
Kidding, kidding.
You're in Kitty. Why haven't
Yeah.
you switched to Western or Ghosty like all the cool kids?
I have Western here. Is not no not Western. I have Ghosty. I have Ghosty here actually, but Ghosty's configuration file I still haven't configured it to my liking. The only Ghosty that runs right now is my LazyGit instance.
Oh,
That's the only thing that's Ghosty.
mhm.
Yeah, that's the only thing that's Ghosty. Everything else is Kitty. I prefer because Kitty I've had a chance to like properly configure it, and it's exactly to my liking.
Oh, okay, okay, wonderful. And oh, what about multiple monitors? Do you like working with one monitor or multiple
Yeah,
ones?
to I need to.
Yeah, can you explain why?
Yeah. Um, I think part of it comes because of being a film editor. You need two monitors, right? Sometimes your source monitor versus your, the monitor that you are, where you have your timeline and so on and so forth. So I kind of got used to it that way. But because I was working as a writer and a film editor at the same time, what I started seeing was, oh, I could have any reference documents on the second screen while my primary screen is where I'm writing into this. So that became a thing. And now, with how I work, multiple monitors. So even when I'm portable, when I'm like mobile rather, when I'm moving around, I use my iPad Pro as my second external monitor. You can extend it that way, right? So even if I'm like traveling in a plane or in a train or something like this, the iPad becomes my second monitor of sorts, and it's very useful that way.
Okay. Since you write a lot, handheld is very important. I write a lot of markdown for my notes, technical notes.
Mm.
If I need to do
Mm.
something, I write it down because I will forget it in a few months. And
Mm.
hands start suffering after a while. How has
Yeah.
that been? What keyboard do you use and how How has the experience been?
So I recently got myself a mechanical keyboard. I've always been okay using, I mean, especially once I moved to Vim key bindings. And Mac has this thing called Vim, kind of Vim or Vim Anywhere. I think it's called kind of Vim, where you have inside text boxes inside the Mac OS, operating system, you can have Vim key bindings. Does that make sense? Right? So,
Mm,
like, no, okay, let me just show you.
yep.
This is my address bar. Right now, I have Vim key bindings. You see that?
Hold on,
Okay.
it's delaying a little bit. There.
You see it now?
I see
So
like
this is Vim
a
key.
raycast menu. Hold
You
on.
know, do you see my browser? Do you
Yep.
see my browser address bar? Yeah.
Yep.
So this is Vim key bindings on my browser address bar itself because it's running a Mac app called Kind of Vim. Like it's
Mhm.
called kind of. It's called this, right? So those all of those has helped in terms of like making sure I don't have RSI and so on and so forth. Mouse usage has also drastically reduced. But the problem with using a Mac in a tropical country is it's very hot. It's incredibly humid. So my arms tend to be extremely sweaty, and those tends to smudge the base of the Mac laptop, right? Which I found extremely, like it's kind of disgusting. So I'd have to every day clean it up as well. So I recently bought myself a XLR keyboard, this one. This is and this is basically now my new little toy, and it's great. It's just so great. Like I've been wanting to get myself a proper mechanical keyboard for a while, and this one is just like exactly how I wanted it. And now that I've got it, it's like it's great. I don't know
What
if it's going to. Sorry, go on.
what does your partner say every time you come up with something new? Because I keep coming up with new shit all the time. Like, oh, I need a new keyboard. I have to find a way to
Yeah,
tell her. And it's $400
yeah,
and it's like,
yeah,
what the
yeah.
fuck is happening next? What's the
Yeah.
experience there?
I mean, so she's seen how hard I've been working with this new project, right? So and I was like, listen, I need to treat myself with something, and she was like, yeah, go for it. You're an adult. You don't need to ask this. And I was like, yeah. But this is going to be a little ridiculous. And I got myself this. So this is basically, the company that makes OnePlus phones.
No. Oh,
OnePlus,
OnePlus, yeah.
the
OnePlus
phone
phones,
made.
yep.
Yeah. So this is OnePlus's mechanical keyboard. It's completely aluminum. It's got gasket mounted, linear tactile keys. It comes with VIA and QMK, and it comes with the dial as well. Like hold up. This, do you see the dial?
I don't
Do
see
you see
it.
this dial?
This
Where? Yeah.
there,
Okay. Do you
there.
see the dial? Oh, do
Yeah,
you see the
I saw
dial?
it.
Yeah. So it's great. It's so heavy. It's so heavy that you can use this in a zombie apocalypse. So I was like, in case there's a zombie apocalypse, I have a thing that will protect us. And she's
Uh-huh.
like, okay. She's like, why do you need a keyboard that heavy? But it's also like, I showed her the things it can do, and she was like, she looked at it, she just, shook her head and walked off, being like, yeah. She was like, it's a good thing. It's a good thing you have other talents because this is not the thing I would have fallen for. If you had shown me this at the start. It's like, cool.
Oh, okay. Yeah, funny. I told my wife the same thing. Hey,
Mhm.
my Mac Mini, is always on my desk. Sometimes
Yeah,
I want to work somewhere else, right? I want to
yeah,
go to the
sure.
bed, work there, go to the couch, work there. you know, I had to set the stage
Mhm.
to get a $3,000
Mhm.
computer. And
Yeah, yeah. There you go. No, I
yeah,
see it. I see it. Yeah, like even so. I mean, I tried. The thing is, I don't like throwing away my tech, right? I make sure that I repurpose it and all that stuff. But every 4 5 years or so, I need a fresh batch of electronic gear in my hand, right? So after I finished my editing and finished my first film, I was like, I deserve some sort of reward because I was basically editing day in and day out for 8 months. Like, and I was editing, like, working 18, 19-hour days, right? So it was. So I was like, I deserve a reward. So that's why I got myself the Mac in the first place. I was like, okay, I need battery life and so on and so forth. So now that I've gone through another 2 years of working on the Mac and all that stuff, I was like, I need a keyboard. So about 2 weeks ago, I got this keyboard. I got myself this nice. I know as Emac and NeoVim users, we don't use the mouse so much, but because I edit a lot on DaVinci Resolve,
yeah,
video
you need
edit,
it. Yeah,
yeah, you need that, right? So I got myself a nice little ergonomic mouse there as well, which is pretty cool. So yeah, man, like just a regular nerdery. That's it. That's what it is.
yeah. Okay. Now moving on to something not technical anymore, and I guess we're going to be done soon. We've been here for 2.5 hours, and you should be writing your
Yeah,
book.
I know.
Yep.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
Let's
go on.
just talk about, not technical stuff at the end of it. Um, what is your movie about, and where can we find it?
Okay. My first film is about a contemporary artist based in Sri Lanka called Parla, Pala. The movie is also called Parla after him. The film is in film festivals right now. So what happens is the movie business is you either when if you have a Marvel film, for example, you have you have the stars, you have the budgets. You don't need to do what I'm doing, right? In cases where you don't have the largest budget and the most like stars, what you have to do is you have to send it into film festivals, and it'll run and those film festivals individually will decide if your film is worth showing in that festival or not. If it runs in the festival, they have something called a market. And it's a market where distributors come and see if there are films they want to distribute. Right. So my movie is in that process right now. So it's no you can't see it anywhere until that part of the process is done.
Oh, have you? Well, of course, you have heard about the platform movie MUBI.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Of course. Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
probably it could end up in movie, right?
Fingers crossed, man. Fingers crossed. But we shall see.
Okay.
See, even in the case of movie, a lot of the films that are there took years for it to get there.
Mm,
In some cases, right? Like, right. So sometimes you rediscover a film after its first appearance in public consciousness. No one really paid attention to it. Then 20 years later, someone rediscovers the film. Those things happen, right? So yeah, even nothing is like straightforward. Even with movie, it has to do well in festivals. It has to do well with distributors, and then it kind of like works its way there. It's just incredibly like convoluted, complex market dynamics that at work there, and sometimes it's just very hard to keep track, even for those of us in the industry.
yeah,
Mm.
because I would like to watch it. I'm eager to see what you came up with based on what we have discussed in the interview. All of the
Mm.
dedication that you put into your tools, your writing, and all that. I want to
Mm.
see what it is about. So let us know if it's
Yeah, I
published
will.
somewhere. let us know. And
Sure.
okay,
Sure, man.
what would you say are your favorite movies? You want to talk about two of them?
Yeah, sure. Favorite movies. Okay. Your audience is mostly like American, right? So I'm just going to give American films for the time being.
From
I'd
everywhere.
say,
They're from everywhere,
okay.
but mainly
Um,
American. Well, maybe
yeah,
from the
mainly,
United States, because I'm
yeah,
American as well.
yeah, exactly. I'd say, let's go with 2001: A Space Odyssey and Apocalypse Now. Those two. Like two very different films, but those two.
Apocalypse Now. Let's see.
It's from 1979, and 2001: Space Odyssey is from 1968.
What is the Space Odyssey one? How did you say it was?
2001, as in you write it in numerals, 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's science fiction. Apocalypse Now is a war film from 1979. Yeah, so that is one film, and the other is Apocalypse Now.
Apocalypse Now.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, those two. Yeah, they're
Okay.
very different films. They're very different films. One is like very measured and science fictiony. The other is just like a bunch of filmmakers and American actors on drugs and booze trying to make a film and just making this epic, beautiful, messy film in the process. And I love the fact that it's messy and it's not a perfect film, and that's one of the reasons I like it.
Okay. Wonderful. And what about music? Do you have any?
Ooh, yeah. Are we going with bands here, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
not.
or whatever you want to share.
Okay. I mean, I am currently mostly listening to music, uh, progressive metal from South India, mostly. But if you ask me, like, who are my favorite bands, I would probably say Soundgarden and Tool. Let's go with that for the time being.
Interesting. Progressive
Yeah,
metal.
Soundgarden. Yeah, yeah.
You seem like a really calm person. I didn't know that you
I,
like metal.
oh man, I am very much a metalhead. It's just that I have. It doesn't appear so now, but say about 10 years ago, it would have been very obvious that I was a metalhead. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Was a huge metal head back then.
Ah,
Yep. But now
nice.
I'm not
Not
anymore.
so much.
Yep. And two books that you want to share?
Okay. My favorite novel of all time is translated from Spanish. It's 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. That would be my favorite novel of all time. Another one that goes with it. Oof. Let me look at my library. Okay, let me go with Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides.
Okay. This is
You've
one
read
of,
100 Years of Solitude. Do you speak Spanish,
yeah.
Christian?
Spanish
Okay.
is my
So
main
have you
language.
read? Okay. Have you read 100 Years of Solitude in Spanish?
I think I read it like in the school, but this was
Okay.
years ago. I don't even remember.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I read this every year. 100
Oh
Years
yeah.
of Solitude.
In Spanish?
Yeah. No. I wish, but I read it in English, and it's just an incredible novel. It's just like there's nothing like it. There's never been a novel like it. There's probably never going to be a novel like it. It just feels like an entire universe inside a book.
Now I want to read
Insanely
again.
good writing. Yeah, it's incredibly good writing. Just he's great.
Oh, okay. I'll have to read it again probably because I did it when I was a kid many years ago.
Okay,
And
that's how the book starts. Many years, like the book starts with that very same sentence. Many years later, da 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 da. So when you said many years ago, I was like, okay, is he making? Never mind. I
reference.
thought you were like, yeah, reference to the book itself. I thought you were making a reference to the book itself.
Oh, okay. And
Okay.
think we are basically done. Anything you want to share
Yes.
before we wrap it up?
No, I think we touched on a lot of things. We started at 7:30. It's about 10:30. So we've already done like 3 hours, and I don't think anyone wants to hear anything from me after this. They've heard enough.
Okay. I'm going to leave all of the links in the video description so people can find your book there, the webpage, your GitHub repo, and all of that stuff. Just wanted to say
Nice.
thanks for all your time. Pretty sure this is going to be really interesting. I'll share it in Reddit as well, and we'll see what people
Okay.
say about it.
All right. Thank you so much, Tricia. Thank you for asking me, and thank you for your time, and thank you for everything that you're doing for the community.
All right. You're very welcome, Dina. Thanks to you.
Take care, man. Bye bye.
Bye.